Hey everybody, welcome back to Maker's Bar, where we're trying to create 1 million leaders. I'm your host today, Troy Goldenberg, along with my dog Luna. And we're speaking with Joe Rote today. He's a labor organizer who has written for a handful of progressive publications, including but not limited to Prism, Jacobin, The Progressive Mag, Red Pepper, and elsewhere. Excited to speak with him and just get to know this movement a bit better that I am definitely nervous about. So hopefully I'll calm my nerves. We'll see. Joe, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, hopefully I'm not too nerve-wracking. But
No,
I'm
you seem
glad to
like
be here.
I'm not nervous about you, the individual, at all. You seem like a good guy. We just disagree on, I guess, our worldviews here and on politics for sure. But I want I want to learn more about your movement. It's definitely growing, which I think you should be excited about at least. And yeah, I was hoping to get to know it better. But first, I want to know you. And the way that I always start these conversations is, what is your story? If you want to begin that from childhood, from school, what brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. In the context of my political writing, activism, whatever you want to call it, my story definitely starts when I was in high school. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, kind of a gastroenterological disease that requires expensive medication, lots of doctor's appointments, stuff like that. And so I think this is a good place to start my story because prior to that, like any high school kid, you think you have politics, you think you have like beliefs, but more often than not, it's kind of derived from your parents or what your teachers are telling you, stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so basically I had, a couple months in and out of the hospital when I found out I had this disease. And I didn't really think too much about it throughout college and my kind of early developmental years, just because I was on my parents' insurance, right? And so I was not really seeing the hospital bills or anything like that. And then when I graduated and got a job, obviously, on my own insurance now, I started seeing how ridiculous the American healthcare system is, where it is very clear when I'm receiving bills for these medications and paying them that our insurance system is not designed to deliver healthcare, but rather to create profit for certain companies. And I think that was the first time at least in my adult life, where, I had been told a lot of stuff about, specifically from my history classes. I took history all throughout high school, college, kind of just your average, history nerd, like most middle-aged white guys in this country, that I had been told a lot of like, capitalism produces the best outcomes. It is, the profit motive is the way to distribute goods. And I was, just facing reality that this was not the case, where I'm calling insurance companies, like half crying, begging them like, hey, my doctor said I need this medication by next week, and you're telling me you're not going to pay for it. Like, what do I have to do? Right. And so I think it's important to start there, because that wasn't so much like an event. I didn't get involved with DSA or become a political writer after that. It just sort of sat in the back of my mind. And as I, left what I kind of call the fake world of college, where there's a cafeteria and your schedule is set, and you join the real world, you kind of get into reality, right? And so going about reality and noticing the differences between the capitalist system that I was told how it's supposed to work and, how it was actually functioning for me. So I kind of just grew more interested in politics over the time. I wouldn't really say I had like a consistent political view before I got involved in DSA. I think I was probably just like your typical. I came from a Democratic voting family, but at the same time, like throughout college, I probably had like a little bit of like a right-wing YouTube phase, just watching bullshit Alex Jones and Ben Shapiro videos, that stuff. And then as I started to pay attention, ask more questions, and couldn't find answers from traditional sources, I started to kind of find my own. So I think I joined the Democratic Socialists of America in 2017 or 2018 when I was in Boston. I was kind of what we call a paper member, didn't really do too much activism or anything like that. And then when I moved out to Denver in 2021, that's when I became involved with my chapter. As far as my writing, I think I started my Substack, like I opened it on Substack like back in like 2020, maybe 2020 during, the COVID lockdowns.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't really write too much until about 2 years ago now, I would say. And yeah, since then it's been going good. I've gotten to write for numerous publications, independent growth, and that kind of brings me to talking to you here, Troy.
It's a good story. It's a good journey. Oh, so you're in Denver today still?
I am, yes.
I lived in Denver for 2 years. I want to settle down when it's all said and done in Colorado. I love that state.
Oh, cool.
Fantastic place. I'm in Chicago at the moment. So you said you were middle aged there. You seem like a young guy though.
Middle age is probably the right term. I feel like every middle-aged white guy, is really into like History Channel, World War II books, right? That sort of stuff. Everybody thinks they're an expert on the Roman Empire or like the Ottomans or something like that. And so I feel like I've just spiritually had that kind of, I don't know, hobbyist history lens. I
Yeah,
did
no,
study history in college, so I guess that gives me a little bit of a one up over the average person. But yeah, just kind of um, like most guys in this country, just a fond fan of the past.
gotcha. So I do find it interesting. I like to know people's stories, especially a conversation like this where it's okay. How did you end up in the party that you're in, like supporting the causes that you're supporting?
Mhm.
Always is a personal story, but um, the fact that you got the healthcare system does make a lot of sense. I don't think anybody I've ever met is completely satisfied with our healthcare system, even the defenders of it. Uh, that makes a lot of sense, and that's a subject of a lot of debate. It's Obama's main piece of legislation, at least that I recall, was the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, and it makes sense that would start driving you um, more towards your position.
Mhm.
And I'm kind of curious on what it is once you got to Denver, let's say, like what was it that made you want to take the dive into DSA and support all the things they support? I mean, I'm not even actually saying that you support 100% of their agenda, but um, was it just that, or was there more to the party that appealed to you?
Yeah, a couple things. One, the healthcare is pretty much a lot of people's entryway into not only, I wouldn't even say left wing politics, but just like a critical view of American established
Mhm.
systems, right? Um, that was kind of like the first time of what I really learned about like what capitalism is, right? Because during that process, I was like, okay, well, I've been told that the process here is I need a medication. Somebody makes the medication, they sell it to me, they turn a profit, I get my medication and stay alive, right? Like very simple Adam Smith style exchange. Um, but I'm not sure if it's due to the nature of the medicines I have to have, but that's not the case, right? Like even when I lived in Massachusetts, I'm getting bills from companies called the Arizona Digestive Health, Medical Center. Never
Mhm.
had. I went to the Grand Canyon once. Besides that, never been to Arizona. Certainly haven't gotten any medical treatment there, right? And so it's just a lot of basically outsourcing, right? Everyone is buying and selling your medical debt, and then trying to charge you for it. And of course, you have to go back to your insurance company, work with them. So that was kind of just like what opened my eyes. I specifically in DSA, we are a multi a multi issue, political organization. I spend most of my time on labor activism, right? So helping people form unions, helping them organize, exercise their collective bargaining rights. Because that was really the first thing I saw when I started asking questions about like, okay, what is capitalism, right? How does it work? What societies use it? What societies have used different variations? Where does it come from, right? How does it grow out of feudalism? What is the possibility beyond capitalism, right? Because it is just another mode of production. We've had, you know, hunter-gatherers, feudal societies, slave societies, right? We're in this one right now. How do we think about this? And I think a lot of leftist socialists, whoever you talk to, will at some point tell you that labor is kind of like the core of their belief, simply because most people in this country, and I would say throughout the world, do not own capital, right? So they have one thing to sell to survive. Their bodies, their manpower, that is labor, right? How does that sale get turned into profit, right? It is, of course, an owner hiring workers who use, in fancy terms, the means of production. In normal people speak, that's just your factories, your computers, whatever it is, to create products and services that are sold at a higher value than what is given to the workers, right? So it's kind of that, people use the word exploitation in sort of not even like a condemning sense, but in a value neutral sense of, workers are doing $20 of work, but they're only getting paid $10 an hour, right? And so I think uncovering that and really seeing how that works is what motivated me to get into labor activism. And then, of course, there is the other fact that, in my opinion, most of our social advancements, queer rights, the Civil Rights Act, Latino advocacy groups, a lot of them tie back to labor, right? Because at the end of the day, even the most marginalized Americans have been able to sell their labor, which is something that capitalism will always kind of benefit. And so when we look at American history, we see who is fighting for, why do we have weekdays? Why do we have the Civil Rights Act? Why do we have the Fair Housing Act? It's because of, in some part, labor organization, right? MLK doesn't get a lot of credit for this. Great labor organizer. He was actually on a picket line when he was killed, right? So these are kind of like, no matter what issue you kind of look at, I think at some point in that issue, there's going to be a labor relation. And that is really what got me into DSA. And then, of course, there's 100 other things that DSA does that I'm also a fan of. Yeah.
See, there's a lot of pushback I give there. Also, but first, that's the part of this that I can respect, and I would actually advocate of I don't want to see your party be successful, to be honest. But if you want to be successful and you want to be the people like me who I'm center left probably, but I think definitely at this point center left actually, given what the right is now. And but if you want to reach more people, it's that labor first messaging. I think that does make sense to me, even though I would disagree and push back on your take on capitalism. And not every advancement has come out of labor. For example, one of the things that labor did poorly in the back in the day was the introduction of the minimum wage in California, and really the introduction to the country. It was a way to not hire Chinese workers. It was a way to be discriminatory towards a specific race of people because they are cheaper labor, as most immigrants are. All you come in, you don't have the language, so you come in with your physical ability to work. And the minimum wage was literally put into place by labor organizations in order to hire white people, Irish people in this case. So there's good things that come out of it. I think the MLK thing is a great example as well. But I wouldn't say the monolith of everything that's good is tied back to this labor thing. Although again, I think the weekday thing is correct. And I don't really have the knowledge. I've only taken one class on one economics class on the Affordable Healthcare Act, which basically taught me man, I really don't know how this thing works. And I don't really have the knowledge to say this is great or awful. And I've talked to Canadians and Europeans that like the system and hate their system, and same with Americans. So on that part, I won't have the knowledge to speak on that. But given my own education and just history, and I can tell you a bit about me as well. I'm definitely a bit of a, not middle age, not yet, but a history nerd. And I've read a lot of different economists. This is probably back more when I'm 29 now. Back when I was 23 to 26, it's really my big econ reading phase. Adam Smith's obviously a huge one. Marx, Keynes is a big one. So there's a handful of just different economic theories that I've read, and the way that you would describe capitalism, I'm kind of interested in just going on that route for 5 to 10 minutes here, where in my mind, and you say this is just in current mode, and this is kind of what I hear from a lot of socialists, or I actually don't know. Are you a socialist? Why would you describe
I
yourself?
am.
Okay,
Yes. Yeah.
this is what I hear is that this is the current mode, and socialism's next. And Marx and a lot of thinkers were socialism is just the next step to communism. If you're going to do it correctly, is what I've read and argued and debated and all of that. In my mind, what's always worked, even going back to feudalism, is a more or less capitalist society where I'm going to provide a service to you as a private individual, and obviously there has to be some governmental help on certain aspects of society, but more or less, I'm going to provide value to you as a private individual. You're going to pay me for that on whatever we agree upon, and that's really how we're going to build this thing. Even when you go back to slavery or feudalism, people still had skills and trades, and that's how a lot of us got last names. And so there is kind of this quasi-capitalism going on already. And slavery was horrible, but that wasn't the only thing happening, right? Like there was still a capitalist society, so to speak, going on there. And to my eye and knowledge, and I think it's growing more undeniable as time goes on, nothing works as well as a capitalist foundation. And I think you can build socialist elements on top of that, but I think the foundation of capitalism has to be there. I think the evidence of that is the West, and even when you look into China, it under President last one, Deng, they implemented capitalist structure. Everyone has index markets now all over the world, and we've seen growth, especially in the third world, unprecedented growth that we've never seen throughout human history, and that seems to be tied directly to the institutions of liberal capitalism, and liberal in the sense of actual definitional liberal,
Small L.
liberal,
Yeah.
not liberal
Yeah.
conservative, but then to my eyes, like everyone has tried to go away from a capitalist foundation. So this doesn't include the kind of go-to Norwegian states and then things of that area. This wouldn't include even Israel, which was another topic we get to, which a lot of socialists would point to Israel if they didn't hate Israel as like, hey, here's a good example. But there's still a capitalist foundation kind of set under there versus everywhere that I've seen, Venezuela, old USSR, old China, that's tried to go the other way. It's always come out behind. So I'm sure you've heard all of that before. So what is kind of like your go-to, like, hey, well, I hear you, I see you, but here's my explanation of why Troy's wrong here.
Definitely. Yeah. Before I touch on that, I just want to clarify one thing at the beginning. And apologies for misspeaking. I'm not saying labor is on the right side of history 100% of the time. That's not at all what I'm saying. You were totally right. Right. Even to this day, unions have been sometimes, more culturally conservative. I don't think they're as culturally conservative as people make them out to be, but you're right. Rather, my view is that in most aspects of our, American life, simply because capitalism is the system we have, there is a labor, what I would use the term of like labor struggle, right? There's a class conflict between the working class and the capitalist class, right? At a very simple level, workers want higher wages, capitalists want lower wages, right? So just to clarify, I am not saying like if you find a union member, they're going to, I know you were. I just want to clarify
for the listener.
Yeah, as for the second part you hit on, I think it's important to clarify what I see capitalism is, right? So I think a lot of times capitalism gets mistaken for commerce, which is basically just participation in a market, right? So like you said, right, since we have evolved from, I don't know what animal we evolved from, since there were cavemen, right? A long time ago, one caveman traded 2 sticks for a fish, right? That is a market interaction. That is commerce, but that is not capitalism, right? So capitalism is a very specific and recent human invention, right? It started early in 13th, 14th century England with the enclosures of the common land, which basically took public land that all the farmers used to herd their sheep, cattle, and feed their families, and gave it to private landlords. And what this did was it forced all those farmers to go from being their own, what we would call like independent business, right, a family farm, to selling their labor for a wage in order to survive, right? So in a very literal sense, capitalism is not a market. Capitalism is the private ownership of the means of production, right? So to give you an example, right, we call Walmart capitalist, right? Because it basically sells everything from, car maintenance to groceries. And it is owned by the Walton family, right? I believe it was started by Sam Walton. Now it's owned by his kids, right? That is privately owned. The profits from Walmart go to the family and whichever other stockholders they have, right? Socialism is kind of a little bit different, but is the collective ownership of the means of production, right? So Walmart, under a socialist framework, Walmart would not be, the profit and decisions would not be made by a single family, but rather by the workers, or rather owned by a larger community. Could be a state, local government, a federal government, something like that. And so I think we do need to distinguish between what is a market and what is capitalism. And the best way I've found to do this is look at the American energy grid, right? So we all get energy to our house, right? We do that by paying a private electric company. You probably know who sends you your electric bill every month, right? But what we are not doing is we are not going out to all the different electric companies in the country and saying, hey, can you run a wire to my house, right? It is not a market interaction that gets us electricity, right? It is government-run central planning. The government plans where companies can put power lines. In many cases, it owns the power lines. It tells them where they can build power plants. And every single aspect of this distribution of energy, which is arguably the most important commodity, at least in the 21st century, is planned by the government. But then we, the consumers, pay a private company, right? So this is a situation in which our energy grid is both centrally planned and capitalist, right? At the same time, you can have a socialist market, right? So throughout various forms of socialism, there have always been cooperatives, right? Worker cooperatives. Imagine if, very common, it's like a grocery store or something like that, will be owned by the workers. But at the same time, these can also be large companies. So the largest cooperative is the Spanish Mondragon Corporation, which I believe is made up of about 256 different companies at this point. And they sell, very similar to Walmart, all different types of food, software, different types of stuff all over the world, right? And it is owned and controlled by its workers. So that is a socialist framework operating inside of market conditions, right? So I do think we need to detach socialism and capitalism from the concepts of markets and central planning, because you mentioned Venezuela. You can go to any country in the world that calls itself communist, socialist, left-wing government, right? And there will be a food market, right? And so like it's not as clear as like capitalism is markets, socialism is state planning. Those are methods of distribution, and what determines what the mode of production is, capitalism or socialism, is, just like I said, really the relationships of the workers to their workspace, right? Their business, their office, whatever it may be. So that's kind of where I differ from you when you say like everything has a capitalist foundation. I think a lot of things have a commerce foundation, and commerce will exist in every stage of human development. Because I think you're right? Like, Troy, I'm not sure if you did that painting behind you of your dog, but like you do a really good painting, right? I want to buy that. I'm going to give you money, right? That interaction happens really regardless whether or not the larger society we're living in is more majority capitalist or majority socialist.
I get what you're saying there. I want to have another conversation where we fully focus on this. I would love more conversations where we can fully focus on a single topic, as we don't have a ton of time here. Because there's a path, a couple of things you said that I really want to dive down. But the big thing I think that we all want, right, is we want as many people to thrive and have as much chance, prosperity, and opportunity as possible. And how do you get there? And for me, when you're talking about the collective, what was the company again? The Mexican holding company?
Mondragon,
Mondragon.
they're a Spanish based. Yeah, they
Spanish.
they
Okay.
started after the Spanish Civil War. Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, for that, I'm like, my mind is that's great as long as everyone in that's working in that wants to be a part of that ownership group. And there's a certain worry I have on how do you get the workers to gain the means of production, because it's through it's through work and money. And if you're not, your equity, sweat equity is more or less money, just paid in a different way. And but a lot of the time, every time that I've studied at least, it ends up with food shortages, and there's still an elite class. There's always going to be an elite class, and it ends up with famine. And the Chinese famine, I can't remember the century at the moment. That was a completely man-made famine that came out of a communist idea, and there should never be famine to the extent there was in that area of the world, because there's great farming land, all these sorts of things. I'd love to dive down that with you, because I know there's a lot of back and forth there. But since we only have about another 15 to 20 minutes, let's save this whole capitalism, socialism conversation for when we have more time. I would like to know a couple more topics. I'd like to know your thoughts on. Again, you don't represent everyone in your group, but I feel like you got a good finger on the pulse here. I'd like to hear your thoughts on Zohran Mamdani. Let's start there, and then I'd love to get to Israel too. That's something that you've written about a bit. I don't know if you've written articles per se, but on Substack and a shorter post, you've written a bit about that as well. And that's really what my knowledge, my number one knowledge base is. So Zohran Mamdani, let's start there. As someone that has endorsed the charter that you guys have and everything there, what do you see in him that you like? What do you see about him? The fact that he's, going to be the mayor most likely. That is a positive for you, and what do you want to build on there? What are your thoughts there?
Definitely. I really like Zohran. I met him back when he was a state assemblyman, I think at the 2023 DSA National Convention. So it was pretty cool. I've got a bunch of pictures with him in my phone when he's just, kind of like a normal guy a little bit more. I think he was a New York State assemblyman there. I'm very excited for, his campaign, fingers crossed, his future mayorship. And I think his success has come from two things. Is one, like I talked about in the beginning, you put bread and butter issues first, right? There's kind of a cliche of, people think left wingers are like, and not that we don't support these causes, but like first and foremost, like it's gay rights or reproductive rights or something along those lines, typically in the social justice vein. And again, we support those, but we always want to lead with like our working class issues, right? And this kind of comes back to what I said in the beginning of why I'm so focused on labor, is because that is what not even Americans, everyone cares about, right? How much money am I getting in? Do I have enough to feed my children? Is there a roof over my head? Why is the bus late? Why does it take me, why are 14 hours of my day spent either at work or commuting to work? And Zohran was born in New York City, raised in New York City. He knows New York City. And so he can, really identify what most New Yorkers care about, which is New York is becoming unaffordable. The buses are too slow, and there's not enough food in my neighborhood, right? And I think if you can, one, address those issues and explain to people how you're going to help them, they will support you. And I do think this election has showed that the average voter is much smarter than most politicians give them credit for. I think Zohran talks to people like an adult, while, from Eric Adams and Andrew Cuomo, they hear the same cliches they've been hearing ever, right? We gotta support the middle class, and like these vague kind of things that people kind of know you're saying nothing. And Zohran just walks up and says, "Hey, we're gonna make buses fast and free. I tried it in this pilot program. It worked. The buses run faster. There's actually less assaults on the buses." People go, "Yeah, that makes sense," and they're adults. And then two, I think this is really underrated in American politics, but sincerity. I think when Zohran says, "I want to do this and I want to help you," people believe him. And I don't know why people think Donald Trump is sincere, but people do think he is sincere. He in this weird way of like, he'll say something crazy and lie to their face, and they'll kind of be like, yeah, but like he still kind of believes this or something like that. And not to compare them, but I do think that's why, these are two of the more popular politicians, at least at the current moment, right? And I do think there's a tendency, especially in the Democratic Party, to view voters as if they are members of a focus group, right? And so you say like, okay, gun control polls at 90%. You know, this isn't true, but marijuana polls at 10%. So I'm going to be really, really stern on guns and really anti-weed. And like you end up with like this person who like you're trying to like talk to everybody. Yeah, like they're like a point on a chart, and it just doesn't work, right? And I think Zohran comes in, and similar to like Bernie Sanders, is people hear him talk and they think like, I think he's on my side. And I think that cannot be underrated in American politics because, in my opinion, both political parties, lots of the media are constantly not, I wouldn't say they're lying to people, but I think people know that they're pushing a narrative, pushing an agenda that is not really in their benefit. I think the average person knows that rich people, powerful people just have more control over American society. And so that kind of jades everything they hear from the media and the parties. And so when, Zohran, who can say, yeah, I was born and raised here, I'm doing this for you. And, he's not some guy who came out of the Heritage Foundation or, was a DC staffer. Like he's just a guy from New York who believes in what he says and is willing to take positions that might not be 100% popular because they believe in. I think that earns credibility with voters. And they're like, yeah, I may not agree with you on this socialism stuff, but like your bus plan sounds good and I'll vote for you.
Yeah, I think I actually see a ton of similarities between him and Trump. And I will say I think he is more honest than Trump too. Hey Loon. Hey, ¿acuéstate? ¿Acuéstate? Good girl. Okay. She wants to be
good training.
Yeah. She speaks Spanish and she's a good girl. Just excited. She's ready for mom to come home. But I do see a ton of similarities between the two, which also scares me. And the more I've learned about a lot of his stances on being, he's pretty anti-cop, at least he used to be. And I'd assume this is kind of where that disingenuousness comes in. It happens probably to every politician. It seems he's still pretty dang anti-cop, but he's kind of stopped talking about that, which I think is probably popular in the DSA and more progressive movements still to be kind of anti-cop there. And the other thing is he's very, very buddy with anti-Semites, and that terrifies me, especially the biggest city in the country. It's supposed to be the future of the country. New York has been the hub of the global economy. And if you want to experiment with the buses or something that's a great platform thing to do. The Kansas City mayor, I'm from Kansas City originally, mayor for a long time now. He ran on fixing the potholes, and he fixed the potholes. And like I think there's things like that, and he's a genuine good guy, and there's things like that like I understand, like it can get behind. I understand I have friends that would vote for him or rank him even. Like I have Jewish friends who ranked him as far as their mayoral voting goes on the Democratic primary there, and I can see those appeals to the anti-cop thing. Definitely would freak me out if I was a New Yorker. Even being in Chicago, I feel very safe. I think most cities, the crime is overblown by Fox News and conservatives. I think it's mostly overblown, but there's definitely pockets of the city that it's just dangerous, and you don't want to go there. And even the residents there, when you poll them or even if you speak with them, they really do seem to want more cops and just to have safety to go out about their days. So those are a couple of things that definitely freak me out a bit. Very quickly, I want to hear your thoughts on the cop stance, and then we can move to Israel. Because probably only have about 10 to 15 minutes left here.
Okay, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think you're right. I think what Zohran is doing right now is what kind of a Black Lives Matter, defund the police, political strain looks like in practice, right? I really like his line where he says, I don't want to fight the cops. I want to work with the cops so that they can solve serious crimes, right? Homicides, murders, that sort of stuff. As for, which is, I will say, like, is required. If you're going to be a mayor, you are going to have to deal with the police force. I think it's a mistake to assume that because communities are feeling unsafe or subject to criminal behavior, is that the solution is more cops, right? New York City, the police force alone it fluctuates. I believe the last I saw was it's the 30th largest army on the planet, right? So there's, I can't remember, 200 something countries, right? New York City alone has a bigger army of cops than most of those countries, right? So the idea that like we can solve crime by just hiring more cops is not true. And everyone in New York says the same thing. Even like the people who I don't think share my or Zohran's politics is the cops stand around on the subway platform and play Candy Crush, right? I hear that from everyone, right? And it has been, kind of recognized by the NYPD as something they're going to tell their officers to start doing, right? So they have enough officers. I cannot see any scenario in where making it the 20th largest army on the planet is going to stop crime. And I think what Zohran does is he, comes out and says, hey, every politician from both parties has funded the police more. And has crime gone away? No, it hasn't, right? People will say defund the police didn't work, have their critiques of the slogan. I still have not seen, any real big city that defunded the police. Like I think like Seattle cut the budget by like
Minneapolis
sorry?
defunded the police, and it went very, very poorly, and they refunded. They took a big defund actually, that's where George Floyd happened. And I will tell you this: George Floyd happened. They defunded the police. I have friends in Minneapolis. I go there every year. It is not the same city anymore. Places that used to go out and feel safe and have fun, you just can't go anymore. It
In Minneapolis, you can't go
drastically
out?
affected. You can go, not all of Minneapolis, but parts. So like North Minneapolis was a part that we always go out in. Not anymore. It is a drastically different city in pockets of this different parts of the city. So there was the experimentation there, and I'm not saying that policing is a problem. So I'm not saying there aren't experiments that need to be had. However, defund the police took very, very strong roots, and probably exactly where it should have. If it's going to take strong roots somewhere, right where George Floyd happened, that's where it should take strong roots. That was an experiment that did happen. It went very poorly. I don't know a single person. I know very progressive people. I don't know a single that live in Minneapolis, old to young. I don't know a single one that's like has that same conviction anymore because they lived through it. So I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're good. I'll have to check that out. I had heard different things about Minneapolis, but yeah, I'll have to look into it. But I do think, returning to my point, is I don't think like, let's say I'll give you Minneapolis, right? Just taking your word for it, right?
Yeah.
Like take every other city in America, right? Like police are well funded and there is still crime, and so I think what kind of a left socialist position can do is let's address the roots of crime, right? Because I do think crime is a social issue in the fact that people who don't have enough to eat steal food, right? That's happened in every civilization, right? I do know one of the most stolen items in New York City is, of course, like baby formula, right? And so like that gives us indication of why people are stealing, right? And of course, that creates, I've heard a lot about these organized shoplifting rings and stuff like that. Like that's why they do it, so they can sell it to people at lower cost. So I do think there's a lot of benefit into rethinking public safety, with what people like Zohran will probably call like violence interrupters, right? Like how can we steer somebody off of a path that might lead in criminal activity? Can we give them better education? A roof over their heads, things along those lines. And I do think it has worked. It's worked here in Denver. I can tell you that. And I've seen a little bit of evidence from Chicago, and then of course Baltimore is the best example where they have curtailed murders to a
Yeah,
oppressive
I would
extent.
love to. This is a whole other discussion. I think we can spend an hour on, or
Yeah,
more on, because I would love to go on the
I'll
Baltimore
stop
angle.
there. Yeah,
No, I think Baltimore's a great example for your point of view.
yeah.
I I would love to go on that. I think Chicago. I think from statistically speaking, I want to say it's been down. Murders across the country have been down. Um, in Denver, I don't remember the stats anymore. It was a handful of years ago I lived there. I never thought that Denver had really issues with safety. There's a homelessness issue more so around the capital. Um, Homelessness is something else we could talk about. Like there's so many subjects that I'd love to talk about with you, but and just to understand your guys' point of view better and your point of view better. But with the time we have left, my main concern, what really scares the crap out of me about this movement, and has had people from this, a former member of the DSA party took my friend's life, in DC, is your anti-Israel, which is hand in hand, if not the same thing as anti-Semitism. Um, Again, so the former DSA member, um, Free Palestine, shouting Free Palestine as he killed my friend in DC along with her to be fiance, her boyfriend. Uh, Zohran Mamdani has he is just friends with anti-Semites, out and about anti-Semites. Hassan
Can I
Piker.
ask you what you mean by that? Who is he friends with that you
Hassan
think is
Piker is
Israel?
one of them. He's done interviews with them. He embraces them. Um, I think everyone on the left, from Bernie Sanders, the far left, from Bernie Sanders to AOC, has embraced. I'm forgetting his last name. Mohammed, the Colombia protest organizer, um,
Mahmoud Khalil?
yeah, I think that's his last name. Who should not have been tried to ship out of this country by Trump. That's wrong on Trump. We have laws that protect everybody, citizen or not. If you're on this land, you get your constitutional protections, which is one of the great parts of America. So what Trump did to him is wrong. However, making this guy a hero is terrifying. He wants death to Israelis. He wants death to Israel. I think your party has no understanding at all in any way of what the actual truth is over in Israel and Palestine. Um, and so I'm going to ask you some direct questions. This is the part I'm like, I can't wrap my head at all around what anything you guys say are. I've seen people that align with you politically kill my friends in Israel and America, and be proud of it. Um, and it's very scary. So on that note, what is do you all envision a two-state solution where a Jewish state can exist in Israel? Is that what you believe? Is that what the party believes? Let's start there.
Sure. I have to say two things really quick
Yes,
because I do have
you
to,
come back to
on
all
the
of that. We can talk
record,
all of that.
I do have to, I just want to go on record and say I don't
Yes.
share your characterization of Hassan Piker or Mahmoud Khalil. As for political violence, I do think it's important to clarify that, people who claim to speak for Palestinians in this regard do not. No matter which Palestinian political or militancy group you ask, like they are all been very clear that for, and this wasn't always the case, but I think for the last, minimum 2 decades, they have said, we do not take action outside of the area we consider to be historic Palestine. So when somebody shoots up,
Sounds true.
a,
Here's my issue.
I think it
Real
was the
quick.
Israeli embassy. Hold on, just a second. And that person says like I'm part of the Palestine movement. That is very much not the case because we do take our cues from Palestinians, and they do not take especially armed operations outside of what they consider to be historic Palestine. So again, I am I pray for everyone who loses their life. I will pray for your friends. I think I did pray for your friends based on the I think I saw it on the news. So I do just want to get at least my side of that
Yes,
conversation.
yes. Go
As
on.
far
Go on.
as like what we think about two state, one state, I think most sober observers can see the two-state solution is not going to work, right? The two-state solution was kind of based on the idea that Israel would withdraw from the West Bank, obviously, and the blockade or siege of Gaza, depending on the year, and there would be a Palestinian state alongside an Israeli state. And that is not the reality, right? The reality is that the area between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea is one state governed by Israel with different outcomes for different people based off of not entirely their religion or nationality. I know the Israelis kind of talk about religion more akin to how Americans would talk about race, but place of birth, right? And so I think the really only solution is full democratization of, I'm just going to call it the political entity, right? Because it's military courts for Palestinians in the West Bank and civilian governance for Israeli citizens in Israel and the ones who live in the West Bank. So all of that needs to be democratized. There needs to be equal rights for everyone, regardless of their race, religion, anything like that. And that is really, like, I can't say, DSA's position is it is not our job to tell people in a different part of the world how to live their lives. But we can at 100% say, like, our values command equal rights everywhere, right? We don't like any sort
It's
of...
not true, though. Like, right there. So I don't doubt your heart. I really think it's not what I'm doubting. I doubt your knowledge, and you just deny reality in plain terms when Hamas and everyone Iran funds, they do want death to Jews around the world. They supported the attack. Their spokesman supported the attack in DC, for example. Globalize the Intifada is a call to globalize the uprisings, as they would say. And the first and second Intifada were mostly the second Intifada, I will say. But that was hundreds of suicide bombings. And that was the call to kill Israelis and Jews. So when you globalize the Intifada, that is what that is. I think there's something in the progressive mind where it's like, nope, that can't be it. And I kind of get it, because when I was young, I'm still pretty young, but when I was younger, I had the same kind of mindset of like, oh, everyone just wants these equal rights and everything. But that's just not the reality of it. And when you say you want a one-state solution, in reality, you're calling for a civil war at best. Like, they don't want to be neighbors with the Jewish people. And right now in the West Bank, and this is according to the PSR, by the way, is the Palestinian survey and research to listen to. It's ran by a Palestinian, I want to say he's at an Israeli university. It's fantastic polling. It's like widely recognized as the best polling, maybe not only in the region, but like really just like kind of around the world. It's like they're a really good system. And according to them, and just also in basic common sense reality, in the West Bank, if we had an election, Hamas would win still today. And it would be a blowout still today. They've actually kind of gained more support since October 7th, as they've lost support in Gaza as they deal with the war. And it's like, when I also want equal rights for everybody. I don't want Palestinians in the West Bank living under military mandates and military court law. That's not what I want. That's not what anyone that I know wants. And we want safety and equality and liberty for the Jewish people as well. And it's been proven over time, both within the last 100 years and with the last thousands of years, the only people that are going to protect the Jews are the Jews. And in this case, the Israelis are the Israelis. And when you call for that one-state solution, you're calling for the dissolution of the Jewish state, which they need. Like that is something that it's never going to be a mover when you say that. People won't listen to you because they shouldn't. And just so you know, like, that's not a solution. It's really not, and it never will be. And no Israeli is delusional enough. At least 95% of them aren't delusional enough to think that. If we could somehow magically wave the wand and say two-state solution, here's all your rights and everything that we all want, but there's still an existence of a Jewish state. Is that something that you're okay with? Like, is that something that you would support?
I mean, I'd have to see the details, right? Like, we talk about two states. I think 1 million people were killed or died when India and Pakistan partitioned, right? Like, so like when we talk about that, right? Like what I hear is there's going to be population transfers, which is a crime against humanity and something that violates the Fourth Geneva Convention, which Israel is a signatory to. And so I can't just say, yes or no, I'm for that. I think a lot of what you said, I take a lot of issue with. I think, one, I'm not here to, Hamas speaks for itself. I would suggest anybody go follow Drop Site if you want to hear their statements. I'm not here to speak for them. I hear a lot in what you said is, well, we have to do this, right? Or Israel has to do this, right? Israel has to, have a Jewish state, or it would, be subject to violence. We have to do this in the West Bank because if we don't, the Palestinians will kill us all, right? And
there's nothing. We could go policy by policy what I may agree with or may not agree with in the West Bank. This is a sticking point that I don't know what it is about the world that just won't accept this. Like, there needs to be a Jewish state, and
why?
For our protection and safety, and right now, really for Israeli protection and safety, but also Jews around the world. That
are you safer in like this? This blows my mind. Like, I heard after October 7th, this is the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust, which I'm taking the word for it. But like, how does that promote Jewish safety? Like, I think safety comes for every group when we can all live in a pluralistic democracy. Like I'm very confused. Like when you say safety,
there will always be. There will always be.
Do you feel unsafe in Chicago?
Right now, as an American, I feel safer than almost anywhere in the world. Truly,
that's kind of my point.
But not everyone, not especially in the Eastern world. Also, maybe not in America if Israel didn't exist. The safest time for Jews in history and the most successful time for Jews in history happens to correspond, at least correspond, if not corresponds with the Jewish state existing. And kind of sorry.
Don't know if that's true, but
no, it's 100% true. What do you mean? This is the safest time for Jews, probably October 7th. Safest time for Jews and most successful time for Jews in history. By far, most innovation we've ever brought to the world. Both within.
I don't know if most successful can be an actual metric. Come on, like. Let me ask you this very simple question: should we have identity-based states? Should we say Israel is for Jews?
There's nothing wrong with
excuse me. Can I finish? Should we say Israel is for Jews, Saudi Arabia is for Muslim Arabs, and America is for white Christians? Or let's use France. Should we say France is for Catholics?
I think every country in the world, America is different. Thank God. I think it's the best country in the world. I don't really believe in chosen people and chosen lands. By the way, the vast majority of Jews don't. But if there was a chosen land, I think it's this land in America. I think we're incredibly lucky, just given geography and the Constitution, everything that we are living in. It's unbelievable, actually. Very blessed. However, the rest of the world, especially the Eastern world, is
Native Americans would disagree.
Yeah, Native Americans would disagree, and that's a whole other topic we can get into. But the rest of the world isn't America, and the rest of the world is ethnic. Almost the rest of the world is an ethnic state. Like the vast majority of all Saudi Arabia, you mentioned, India and Pakistan had their millions of people displaced. Turkey had genocides and displaced people all over the world. Greece is the same thing as Israel. It's the exact same thing. There's the Israeli people.
Greece the same as Israel?
That's the exact same immigration types of policies. Right now, it wants investors, so the immigration policy has shifted a bit.
Hold on.
But
Greece does not have an ethnicity that it prioritizes over everyone else.
Hold on.
Which
Hold on.
ethnicity does
The
Greece
Greek
prioritize?
ethnicity. Hold on, yes, it does. The Greek ethnicity. There are Greek citizens within Greece. There is the Greek diaspora, a Greek ethnic people, and if you are Greek. Also, this works in Poland, Japan, China. I'm not sure about Saudi Arabia. There are avenues to get your Greek citizenship because you are a Greek citizen, even if you were born in America and your parents were born in America. If you are a Greek ethnic person, and it's their country to decide how they want to do their immigration policy, and the issue is like that's allowed. Greece is allowed to do that. China is all China. Like China, and by the way, Israeli citizens, as far talking Israel proper, not the West Bank, Israeli citizens, they're subject to the same laws and regulations, and whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, black, white, brown, they're subject to the same laws and everything. And you can run for prime minister, Supreme Court judge, police, all those sorts of things. And the different ethnic groups within Israel recognize that. I have friends who are Druze, Druze, huge fans of Israel because that's where they're safe and they're protected in Israel. Versus right now in Syria, they're being hunted, literally right now to this day, quasi by the government. And it's wild to me that the Jews are the only ones that aren't allowed to have a state in this sense. Because you don't have a problem with Greece, you don't have a problem with China or Saudi Arabia.
I have a problem with Saudi Arabia. I have a huge problem with Saudi Arabia.
Well, yeah, Saudi Arabia. I meant in their ethnic makeup of the country, though. You don't have a problem with the ethnic makeup of it.
Let me put it this way. There's two things going on that I hear a lot, right? Is that Israel is just like every other country, right? This is not true. In 2018, Israel passed the nation-state law, which I'm sure you're familiar, which says Israel is the self-determination of the Jewish people, right? In this context, let me know if you disagree. Judaism is an ethnicity, right? So to use your example, Japan, a Japanese citizen, someone can be ethnically Japanese, can be like a Japanese citizen, but not of like a Japanese ethnicity, right? And so this is the difference, is that Israel says our state is for one specific ethnicity, right? Japan does not say that. It says that it's the right of Japanese citizens. China,
that's not what the nation state. That's not what it's saying. Anyone can go. Well, dude, it's just not true. It's not true. Anyone can live in Israel, no matter their ethnicity. You can. I
didn't say they can't live there. I'm said that the nation-state law says that this country is the right of a certain ethnicity, right? And so, like, again, I'm sure that a Christian can migrate to Israel. It happens a lot. The difference is that Israel, by its own law, prioritizes one ethnicity over the others, right? So I hear this a lot, right? Israel is the same as France because France is 66% Catholic, and I believe Israel is 80% Jewish and 20% non-Jewish, right? And so they say like,
70-ish% and 20% Arab.
Okay.
A handful of percent or something.
70%. So it's actually very close to France's Catholic population, right? The majority of people are in France are Catholic. France does not say this is a country for Catholics. France says this is a country for French citizens, which is what every country does. That is the difference, right? The United States of America says this country isn't. Troy, can I speak, please?
Hold on. Because let's have a conversation about this. Because you're going to say something that's just blatantly not true or a bad comparison. I feel a need to push back. Where you're talking about religion there, and again, Greece is a good example. Greece immigration encourages Greek.
We're not talking about immigration. We can talk about Israel's immigration policy.
That is what we're talking about. So when you say Jewish determination, this is a state for Jewish. So you're talking about internal laws? Like what are you speaking about? What internal laws of Israel proper? And I'm not talking about the West Bank where there's how we can talk about how we got to the checkpoints. And and why those are put into place and the timing of all these things.
Well, for the laws I don't like in Israel
proper.
is I don't like the admission committees, which say that in towns of now over 700 houses, that if someone wants to move to that town, they have to get permission from a council of the existing residents, which can approve whether or not they are allowed in based off of I think it's socio-cultural, makeup. I'm not quoting this directly, but that has been internationally condemned as a apartheid policy that lets Jewish towns keep Palestinians out of them, even if those Palestinians are Israeli citizens. I don't like that in occupied East Jerusalem, you have families that have been living in Jerusalem for, I don't know, centuries, millenniums, and they are not given Israeli citizenship. They are known as permanent residents, right? And they do not have the full rights of everyone else, even though that they have been living under the Israeli government. What the Israeli government says is Israeli territory, borders proper, since 1967. And so you can, earlier you said non-Jewish Israeli citizens have the equal rights as Jewish Israeli citizens. And that's true. But Israel is very specific about who it lets be a civilian, right? You have thousands of Palestinians living in East Jerusalem who live side by side with Jewish Israeli neighbors and who do not have the same legal rights. They do not have the same legal protections. They are not allowed, legal representation in a lot of places. I do not like that. I also don't like the fact that people from those neighborhoods are not allowed to marry who they want. They are not allowed to marry people from the West Bank who they might know, because of the fact the Israeli government says, no, you can't do that. And so, yes, you are right that citizenship is, not apartheid in that sense, but the Israeli government chooses who it gives citizenship to. And it does that based off of, what we would call race or religion, right? Who is Jewish, who is not.
I have to look into the admissions thing, the 700 houses. I have to look into that.
It was just increased. It used to be 300 houses in the 2000s, and they increased it to 700, I think, in 2019. And this was, this is a widely condemned apartheid policy that is very similar to the Jim Crow South.
I'd be against that. I have to look into it. I'm gonna take your word for it.
You can be against it, but the Israeli state is doing it.
Okay, there's things that in America that I don't like that we're doing. There's things in every country I don't like they're doing, right? Like,
okay, but you started by saying Israel is the same as everyone else, and I pointed out, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have.
What I'm saying, there are towns actually where I don't think it's by law. I hope it's not by law, but there are towns that are all white towns, all Mexican towns, all,
and that's wrong. And Israel has codified that into law.
There was a town in Arkansas, small, like 20 people. They started an all-white town, and it was, I don't know if it made it to the Supreme Court, but it was upheld. It's fine. It's constitutional.
Yeah.
And we can say that's wrong, but like, there's examples. Anywho, but I'm against that. I have to look into it. I'm gonna take your word for it, and that's wrong. And there's things that the Israeli government does that is wrong.
Would you consider that a racist policy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Taking your word
is
for
it fair to say
is.
that the Israeli government has racist policies codified into law?
In this one example, if that is true, I'm taking out your word. Yes, if that is true, then yeah.
Okay, so we can say the Israeli government is racist against Palestinians as jurisprudence.
I would say,
which is why
I would say, yeah, there's definitely racism. That also say, okay, but you could apply that to every government in the entire region about Jews, right?
Well, now you're changing. Now you're moving the goalposts, right? Because we're talking about Israel, and now your argument has gone.
Well, my argument is that my argument is that a Jewish state has a right to exist, just like all the other states do. Like, and the difference, if you want to say like, well, they enshrined in this nationalism thing, the difference is Jews are constantly hunted around the world, and there's no other state on the planet, there's no other people on the planet that after we watch our friends and family get murdered on video, hundreds of millions of people this next day, and the same day, the next day, hundreds of millions of people out in support for that action. That they're in support for murdering Jews and Israelis, like hundreds of millions, if not a billion, like truly. And like that, there's a reason that we need our safety. And the fact that we're the only people like, hey, you don't actually have a right to sovereignty. And not the only people, but the only people that the world has such an issue with is that like the only people that have a state that's a nationally sovereign recognized state that the world is an issue with. That is, of course, it's driven by something that's not humanitarian in nature. It is.
Do
You
you
know, you don't
think
have
my criticism of Israel comes from a place of anti-Semitism?
no. I think it comes from a place of ignorance. Truly,
Ignorance.
I think it comes from a place of ignorance. Truly, like
What do you think I'm ignorant about?
I don't think I think you're ignorant about Jewish safety in this world and the Jew story in this world and where the world's relationship to us as people, which by the way, I think a lot of American Jews are ignorant of. I find that a lot of American Jews who grew up within Jewish communities, I did not. I grew up in Kansas, like didn't know other Jews. I find that they also don't understand what their relationship to the world is like a lot, where you are the constant other. You are the constant, just like scapegoat, so to speak. There's thousands of years of propaganda built up against you. And there's always this just simmering under the surface anti-Semitism that's very dangerous, that pops up again and again and again and again and again. And it's not just the Holocaust, like it happens all the time, centuries after centuries. And there needs to be a place to protect these people. And when we go back to the formation of Israel, it's a refugee state. That's truly what it is. It was hundreds of thousands of people that in the 20s, when Britain and America and everyone closed the borders, as we're seeing kind of this movement now, everyone closing the borders, these people had literally nowhere to go. They were stuck in refugee camps with literally nowhere to go. Everyone else was repatriated or got to immigrate, and hundreds of thousands of people had nowhere to go. And that's when the mass wave of immigration came in as a refugee state. And that's when the Civil War happens. And that's when this 1947 Civil War happens. And the War for Independence happens in 48, which is kind of the same war. And people just have an issue with this one state. The Nakba, 750,000, give or take 50,000 Palestinians or Arabs, Palestinians are, moved from their homes, forcibly moved. There's you can, depending on which historian you read and believe, given percentages there. And that's very sad and that's awful. That's also the history of war, and people move on. Like you build your life, and there's never been a Palestinian leader that has said, hey, let's move on and build the state. Let's build our state. It's always been about the destruction of Israel, which has always been supported. That's what it's always been. What's the one Palestinian leader that's been for this? Truly, can you name it to me? Because I see you shake your head.
Been for
building a Palestinian state next to a Jewish state. Been for moving on and starting to build.
Arafat accepted the Oslo deal.
No, right? He didn't. He walked away. He didn't. He actually complained about, you're trying to get me killed. He walked away from the deal. The one person that said we should
Oslo
take
1 or Oslo 2? I could be wrong.
He walked away. But there's no he and that was everything that the Palestinians wanted, right?
There seems to be this like I got to be honest, Troy. Like I don't know. We're talking about, you keep saying like, well, why does Israel get signaled out? And I gave you my reasons why Israel gets signaled out, right? Because it has, I'm sure it is the state that I am aware of in which it is an explicit ethno state. And two, because it has a unique excuse me. Let me feel.
Okay.
It has a unique relationship to the United States, right? We back Israel. This is,
Not always, though. Not always.
Troy, come on.
No.
America is
Time
Israel's
out.
backyard, right?
Again,
Troy, if I'm being honest, you
speaking.
just spoke for 5 minutes straight. I think I'm allowed to speak. Is that
Hold on.
fair?
No, hold on. You're on my program. Joe.
I was invited here under the
Yes, I know, and I want to have this conversation.
If you're just going to cut me off every time I speak, that's not very fair.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll let you go after this, but again, ignorance. Like you're saying, oh, America has always backed Israel. We had a weapons embargo on Israel. We didn't support Israel to the 60s, really. For the first 14 years of the country, it recognized Israel, and that's what we hear in history class. Oh, we're the first ones to recognize Israel. But had an embargo on it for weapons.
And what happened? How did they get around that embargo? Who provided a lot of the weapons that were used in the Nakba? The Central Intelligence Agency through the mob and Meyer-Lansky. So if you want to go that route, we have had an official embargo on a lot of countries, including Nazi Germany for a while, and they don't really, manifest into reality. I think it's incredibly disingenuous to say that America does not have a special relationship with Israel. I
think we do. There is a special relationship there.
So that is why
it's always supported it isn't true. It hasn't been the main supporter. It was France. It was Czechoslovakia. There were different empires that were supporting of Israel. When Egypt went to war with Israel the first time, they said we need to defeat Russia's influence and communist influence. So there's different timelines of support and strong support and lesser support. Right?
I think you're nitpicking here. Can we say America is
generally very? I need 5 minutes. Yes, sorry, go on.
I think we can both say that America is generally supportive of Israel.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So maybe we can agree on that. In your kind of, remembering earlier to our conversation, you said, well, Israel gets singled out. I gave you the reasons why I criticize Israel, which are based in factual analysis of what you and I agreed are racist policies. Not, every country has racism. Few countries have racism written into their law. And your argument went from Israel isn't doing this to, okay, Israel might be doing this to, well, it's 1,000 of years old. And then, of course, talking about the forming of Israel, right? So you've moved the goalposts a lot during this conversation.
That's not true. That's not
and I'm going to be honest, while insulting me and calling me ignorant, right? Even though I am telling you about admission committees and how the CIA funded the Nakba. So I do have to call that out, right? The reason why Israel gets criticism from Americans and from people in DSA is because we are funding this. It is because our tax dollars go to what is internationally considered a genocide, which was just called the genocide by the, let me make sure I'm getting the name right here, the leading genocide group. I had it in my notes somewhere.
The International Association of Genocide Scholars.
Thank you. Right. That is our money. That is my tax dollars. That is your tax dollars. It is perfectly fair to criticize Israel. It is also perfectly fair to say, I do not want any racist states. I do not think we should have any states based off of religion, race, place of birth, anything like that. I don't think there's any excuse for that. I don't, I'm not doubting that anti-Semitism exists or that there is severe trauma from it in Jewish communities.
It's not trauma,
Troy, please let me speak.
Okay.
But when you say that and you're saying, well, we had to, form this state and we have to do this, that is coming at the expense of the Palestinian people, right? And so two wrongs do not make a right, right? In a very basic sense. You do not get to say this happened to one group, so one group gets to do it to another group. That is not how international law works. That is not how, basic human behavior works. If I came onto this call and was very rude to you, my excuse would not be, well, I got in a fight with my girlfriend, right? That is not how this works. And so I do have to say that I find this, you saying well, Israel gets signaled out, it really doesn't. There are principled critiques of this state. But before the current genocide, even if you ignore the West Bank. And, you kind of did here where you say like, well, let's put aside the West Bank and talk about Israel. That's
Well,
kind of like saying like, let's put aside black people and talk about American civil
that's
rights.
not what I'm
right?
saying. So
you cannot pick and choose certain parts of the
really
state.
Quickly, that's not what I meant. I wanted to put the West Bank aside for a moment because we were having a different conversation.
I think those are the same conversation.
Well, we're talking about Israel proper and the West Bank and the laws that are applied to citizens and of different ethnicities versus nationalities. Like those are different things.
Because Israel applies its laws to Jews living in the West Bank, and it applies military courts to the Palestinians living in the West Bank. So you don't get to say like, well, these are different things. If the state of Israel is applying,
well, there's different areas of there's areas A, B, and C which are under different jurisdictions of Palestinian Authority and Israeli rule, depending on which area you're in. And you can.
That's Oslo, and that's been dead for years, right? Like I told you,
people
of East Jerusalem, I believe, are Territory C, right?
No,
Territory C is East Jerusalem.
There is current law. There is current rules in place at A, B, and C. That might have been set. Also was a framework of like, hey, this is a framework, and then we're going to build from here. And there are parts of the framework are still in place. And that's one of the parts of the framework that's still in place. And I want to talk about the West Bank separately because, like, I think the checkpoints, for example, are a really good example of like how we got to where we are. Like, you just see these checkpoints between these two people. It does look awful, and it is awful. I want that to end. However, the wall and the checkpoints are put into place because of the Second Intifada. As Israeli citizens thought, hey, we're moving towards peace, we're moving towards normalization with our neighbors. Like, this is an incredible thing. All of a sudden, their children start blowing up, and that's when that was put into place, and that's what's hampered the Israeli left for the last 20 years. I think they weren't there before that, right? I think the walls went up, the checkpoints went in, and all of a sudden, the suicide bombing stopped. And that's what stopped them, and it's important to recognize that as well. So that's why I want to put that to the side, and it's.
Were more Israeli civilians or Palestinian civilians killed during the Second Intifada?
Palestinians, why can't you just have like? This is what I don't understand. Like, why can't they both be sad? Why can't they also be like, hey, Israelis also?
Well, to be honest, because you're using one group's deaths as a justification to impose misery on another group. I've never said I don't,
It's safe. The fact that everything that leads back to every solution for you or every aspect of your view leads back to, well, the Israelis should just accept death to their children. Like, and
that's not at all what I said.
But that's what it all gets back to.
I never once said the words death or children.
No, but that's what it gets back to, is where the checkpoints are horrible. Oh, you're using the deaths of these people to impose, military rule, to impose unjust things upon another group. And I'm saying it's not done to impose unjust things. It's done to protect themselves, to protect their family. Like, that's why those checkpoints are in place. Does that make sense?
Every atrocity has been done under the guise of self-defense.
Wait, time out. That's not what I'm asking.
I don't answer your question. I don't recognize that. I don't think there's any excuse for apartheid. I don't think there's any excuse for segregated roads. I don't think there's any excuse for, telling a little girl she can't walk down this street because she's a different race. I don't think there's any excuse for any of that. No. You'll never convince me there's an excuse for racial apartheid.
Again, I want to avoid debating apartheid and genocide and these things because we could do that for hours.
Really isn't a debate.
I actually agree. It's insane to call it genocide. It's absolutely incredibly insane.
I assume are you saying it's not a genocide?
Yeah, it's unbelievably untrue. Yeah, it's extremely untrue. And yeah, I think you have to, as they have done, you have to manipulate. I'm not saying they, by the way, the International Association of Genocide Scholars. I have not read the report yet. So I'm not saying they as in them. But different groups have tried to change the definition of genocide to make it fit.
Do you think that Salem is accurate when it calls?
Sorry?
B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights group?
No,
When
I
they
don't think
called
they're
it a
that.
genocide?
No, I don't. This is a conversation we can have another time.
Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, International
Yeah,
Federation
no,
for
I
Human
don't.
Rights, Center for
Amnesty, I don't put
Constitutional
any.
Rights,
No, I don't. I don't.
Genocide Watch.
No,
You just
no.
think they're all wrong?
Yeah, absolutely, 100% unequivocally. I
So you
think
think the people who study this for a living are
there's
all
also
wrong?
people who study this for a living who say they're wrong.
Who?
There's both sides of this.
Who?
I can find people that I follow on Twitter. There's someone that was actually from the International Association of Genocide Scholars. She had a tweet go viral about how disgusting she
And
found the
did you see who
political.
her source was? It
Um,
was John Spencer, the MAGA troll, who,
he's not a MAGA troll. John Spencer, for everyone watching, he is an urban warfare studies, I want to say professor or head of that organization at West Point Academy. That's a
So I
very
just named, I think,
wait.
7 international human rights groups who have called it a genocide, and your response is one person with, let's call it a
No,
dubious
hold
source
on. No,
or
it's not.
citation.
Hold on, dude. That's not my response. Isn't well. This person says this. Versus, my response is like we could have a debate on that, on what genocide is and what is happening and all these things. Like we could do that, and that would take a long time.
I don't think it's our debate. I think the people who study this have resoundingly spoken. You know, you mentioned the one person, I can't remember her name. I know who you're talking about, but you know, the International Association of Genocide Scholars voted 86%, right? So she's a vast minority. And again, I'm not asking you to trust my definition of genocide. I'm asking you to trust the people who have studied this, including Israeli genocide scholars who, you know, I'm
I
shocked that
understand.
you say B'Tselem is wrong. I feel like
I
they have
understand.
been very conservative.
I know that I disagree there, but I understand. But like, it's an argument of authority. I'm not saying there's nothing to argument of authority. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that we should listen to authorities. We should look into this. We should be concerned about this, especially because these organizations are saying this. I do look into this. I continue to look into this. I don't even agree with how they're going about the war. I know soldiers don't agree with how they're going about the war. I unequivocally deny that it's a genocide. Unequivocally.
Can I ask you what you disagree with though? Because like I hear this a lot is I hear, well, it's a war, but I think they're doing the war wrong. And I think the explanation for that is the Israeli government is not viewing this as a war. The Israeli government has been very clear that they are not leaving Gaza, even if they get the hostages back, that they are not leaving Gaza if they aren't able to control it. And so I do think I can kind of understand your position where you say this is a war, but I think they're doing it wrong. And I think that's because they are not fighting a war. I think they are conducting a genocide, and people think that they are fighting a war.
The reason that they're not, the reason that Netanyahu and colleagues, and I'm not talking about the awful people who would like to commit genocide, which does exist. Smotrich is a good example. I know
who are in the Israeli cabinet, right? Like these are not nobodies. These are
for
not
sure.
people on
And
Twitter. These are people who run the Israeli government.
Also, Netanyahu has addressed these things as well. Of like, hey, these people are in your cabinet, they're in your government. Can you address this? We can get into that again another time. We're running short on time here a bit, but as far as like the reason they're going to stay there, if someone else would say, hey, we're going to do Egyptian, Saudi Arabian, UAE coalition, and we're going to run Gaza. Here's what the scenario needs to be for us to do that. Netanyahu would sign up for that. I've never seen any indication that he wouldn't. I've seen him talk about it. Israelis would sign up for that. Most Israelis don't want to have anything to do with Gaza. That's why I disengaged in 2005. The fear is, and here's an example of why I think I know what your response
controlled the airspace for 20 years. I mean, they didn't disengage.
And still they still have rockets, and they still have weapons, and they still have
Do you know why? Because Netanyahu directed the Qataris relief fund to Hamas over the Palestinian Authority,
which was super, super popular amongst the far left in Israel because they thought they would moderate them. The people he had to convince, there's a famous video of this actually. where he's like having to convince people of, hey, fund Hamas, was the far right. He was convincing Likud and people like, hey, we have to, because the far right were the only people, Arab, Jewish, anybody that were against funding Hamas at this time. They were the only ones, the far right. So right now, we all agree with the far right of Israel back in 2000 and 2005. Sorry, back in 2005, 2010.
I have to. That's not my characterization, but
I'm just saying, like, if you're against the funding, which I'm against the funding, that was a bad idea.
I don't think it's Israel's money. I don't think Israel has any right to. And this is my point. Like you say, Israel
You have no right
disengaged.
to.
They
You have
clearly
no right
didn't
to be.
because
You have no right to be sick. That's my point. Is that for some reason, in the world's view, Jews have no right to be safe, to make ourselves safe in the world.
Troy,
And that's
you're
what
taking my
that
criticism of Israel's blockade of Gaza and saying, well, what you're saying is Jews have no right to be safe.
yeah.
That is incredibly unfair. I think we can agree, right?
I would say I think you're being unfair. Okay, so let's say today.
Troy, you just called me an anti-Semite because
No.
Yes, you did. You said you don't think Jews have a right to be safe.
Hold on, time out. You can't say back 20 minutes ago that, hey, I never said XYZ words. I was like, well, it kind of feels like you're implying those things. And then you accuse me of calling you an anti-Semite when I've never said that. But
Okay, that's
you
fair.
felt like I was
That's
implying,
fair.
and I'm sorry, I did not mean to imply that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate
Again,
it.
and when I say ignorance, I don't mean it as an insult. I don't know a better word. I know. I don't know a better word of like it, and I guess I get to this point with like everyone who agrees with you, and I've had this conversation a lot. I don't think you're an anti-Semite. I just can't wrap my mind around every time what it comes down to, and I know you're not saying this. I know you're not saying this, but what your idea equals is Israelis have to accept their children being killed. Is it because that's what's going to happen? So, for example, I know you don't think that. I know, but like, for example, if Israel ended the war today, took all their soldiers out of Gaza and everything, ended the war today, Hamas is still intact. Hamas is still going to run that area. We've seen that the siege or the blockade was extremely ineffective, like extremely so. They have thousands of rockets. They still have weapons. Like it was a very ineffective thing to stop Hamas. Like the whole goal of the blockade was to stop Hamas from being able to prepare for war and go to war. That was the goal, and it was a failure. So if everyone leaves today and Hamas is still in power, and we know what Hamas is going to do, and we know what the goal is, and we know what's going to happen again in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, would you be for a reinstallation of that blockade? And also, this time it has to be better. It has to be a bigger blockade, like a better blockade. Would you be for that? I know your answer is going to be no. Exactly. So like we have to
Troy,
wait till Jews get slaughtered again. Does that make sense?
Again, I really, you do not get to incarcerate and 2.2 million people off of the idea that 25 years from now they might kill us. And this is what I was talking about when I said every atrocity is done under the guise of self-defense.
They're going to try and kill
Troy,
them.
can you please let me talk?
Okay.
On the eve of the Good Friday Agreement in the north of Ireland, when the Troubles was going to be solved diplomatically, a very prominent Ulster paramilitary leader, Protestant, said, "This is the eve of genocide. The Catholics are going to come. They're going to kill us." Right? We've been, I know the Israel-Palestine gets chalked up to thousands of years. It's 76 years, right?
100
The colonization of Ireland has been going on for 800 years, right? So it's about 8 times longer than Israel-Palestine, right? That didn't happen. People do not have a desire to fight. I think the idea that, um, Palestinians are going to elect a group who tries to kill every Jew in the world is not accurate.
That's a question on that, though. What about every Jew in Israel? Or the
What
vast
about
majority? Would they elect someone that would want to kill the vast majority of Jews in Israel? Or drive them out, even?
Would Palestinians elect someone who wants to drive out the vast majority of Jews in Israel? Is that the question?
What about that? Kill or drive out?
I don't have any idea like who Palestinians would elect. But what I'm saying is you do not get to say these people might do that, therefore we get to enclose them, right? Like you mentioned earlier, 2006 Israeli withdrawal, 2005 the blockade intensifies. The blockade of Gaza did not start in 2005, right?
No,
You
it
and I
started in
both know.
2007. So the
No,
blockade
Israel has
started in
been
2007.
controlling imports into Gaza since the 90s.
Yeah, but there was a blockade. So in Egypt in the 90s. Right now, today, Israel controls the whole border. They control the Egyptian border today, but that wasn't the case before the war. That wasn't the case before the war. There was a whole thing about
I
it
think you're wrong.
when Israel took over. When
the
Israel took
Israelis
over,
got approval rights. What goes into Gaza? The Egyptians internationally.
The Egyptians controlled the border.
With
They were the ones
Israeli
in order.
with Israeli approval rights. Israel since 2007, Israel has controlled what goes in and out of Gaza, including on Egypt's border.
Yes, since 2007, I agree. So in 2005, Hamas is elected. They start sending rockets in for year and a half. And in 2007, that's when the blockade comes in, when Egypt still controlled the border, but it was under Israeli permissions. For sure. So like again, year and a half after Hamas got elected. And the thing is, you say you don't know. You plead ignorance here on the would Palestinians elect someone that would drive Jews into the sea. We do know. We know it for a fact. It's why Abbas canceled the elections in 2021. It's why he won't hold elections. The PSR, which is ran by Palestinian, also is fantastic. That's the sourcing if you want to go for polling in this area. That's the one. And that's not. I know it's a Jew saying this, but that's not just me saying this. Like Palestinians recognize this too. Hamas would win that election. That's just the truth. And Hamas runs on no Israel, and we have to reconcile with the reality of that. And the thing is, Israelis every time that Israeli society, every time they've thought there's a chance for peace, they have voted peace. Even with Sadat, that's 100%. Even with Sadat,
electing Benjamin Netanyahu is not a vote for peace.
They elected Benjamin Netanyahu after or in the midst of their children being blown up on buses and in restaurants and in schools, and that's when this happened. Like I'm telling you, there's a story here, and it didn't start on October 7th. And there's a story that happens. Your inclination is to say, hey, Israeli society fucked up. Israeli society fucked up. And just that is your inclination.
I think Zionism is the source of all this. Yes.
Yeah, and to me, there is blame to spread. I think the vast majority of the blame actually lands on a lot of the outside world. That has nothing to do with Israel-Palestinians, but every time that Israeli society has thought there could be peace here with any of the neighbors, including Palestinians, they have voted that way, and they have shown it that way. Sadat is a prime example, and giving up the Sinai after capturing it, which is, they cut off 60-some% of their nation for peace. And this is something that they thought was impossible, which gives me hope, by the way, for a two-state solution and peace with Palestinians. That gives me hope. They thought this was an impossible thing with Egypt, and that happened. And whether you believe it or not, what we have to reconcile with is Israelis thought they were getting peace with the Oslo Accords, and they thought they were in the midst of that. And what they got out of it was 100+ suicide bombings, and they don't know why to this day. We thought we were doing this for peace, and the society next to them responded in this way.
Well, I mean, settlement expansion famously increased during the Oslo period. And the Israelis admitted, oh, well, this is a bargaining chip so that's not, stealing people's land and
So hold
kicking
on,
them out
but
of
so
their
that's so
homes
hold on. So
currently
you
is
can
not peace.
wait. So a wrong doesn't justify another wrong.
Wait, what?
You've told me that one wrong doesn't
No, no, no.
justify.
You said the Israelis have been asking for peace. And I'm telling you, going into somebody's land and stealing their houses is the antithesis of peace. And it is well known. The Israelis have admitted to this. They've called it a bargaining tactic that during the Oslo period,
Yeah, no,
West Bank settlements increased.
I'm
That is
not.
not peace.
I'm not. I'm.
But your
So
theory that
that
Israelis
So
have
that
pursued peace runs
hold on. I
flat
have a
into
question.
their
I
own
have a
admission.
question. So settlement expansion, whether you think it's a bargaining chip or not, that justifies and wipes away 100+ suicide bombings targeting
No, I
Israeli
never
civilians.
said that, Troy.
But
I
that
never
was your immediate
No.
go-to. It was like, well, they're doing this. Like they're
No.
doing
What,
like that
Troy?
was your immediate go-to. I'm
Troy,
trying to
you
understand.
said the Israelis have pursued peace, right?
Yeah.
Through Oslo. And I'm telling you, during Oslo, they were increasing settlement expansions. I never said that justifies a suicide bombing. What I'm telling you is that your theory that Israel has pursued peace and, wants, harmonious coexistence with Palestinian and Southern Arab neighbors is 100% irrefuted by the fact that settlement expansions increased during the Oslo period. Your statement was that Israelis wanted peace and they don't know why they didn't get it at Oslo. And I'm telling you, you can't say we want peace while you are stealing people's land. You very much don't want peace. If I stole all your stuff and said, I don't get it, why are you mad at me? That would be incredibly disingenuous on me. And of course, I'm not saying justifying a suicide bombing. I am simply pointing out that your claim was infactual.
That doesn't refute my claim though. Of
that Israelis wanted peace at Oslo?
It doesn't
sure
refute
it
my
does.
claim. No, it doesn't. What? So
Troy, if I said to you, like, hey man, I really want to be friends, but I'm like stealing all your stuff in the background, you would not think I'm actually wanting to be friends.
If you came to me with saying, hey, even if you're taking part of my backyard, and you came to me and said, hey, you're going to get 97% of the West Bank with land swaps, you're going to get all of East Jerusalem, all of this part of, I can't think of a good metaphor of the house at the moment, but 97% of the West Bank, you get East Jerusalem as your capital, land swaps, the whole thing. And you came to me saying that. Well, by the way, you're acting like I just came into this land and declared it's mine, and there's been no back and forth, and there's been no wrong on your side, and that's not what happened either.
I'm not saying that. I've never said any of that.
But so that's an offer for peace, though. Not like that's what they want today. Like that's what many Palestinians want today, is that exact offer. But there's never been a Palestinian leader who's been willing to do that. Arafat walked away from it. And the one guy that said, because you on the Israeli side and democracy sides, every democracy, you can get 1,000 opinions. We have anti-American voices, anti-Israeli voices. We have pro-American. You have all the 1,000 opinions. The one guy that spoke up on the Palestinian side said, "What are you doing?" Got shot. He lived through it, but he got shot, and no one else spoke up.
I find this to be, I really have to say, like, this idea that, like, I hear a lot, like, oh, where's the Palestinian Gandhi, right? Like, one,
I'm not saying Gandhi.
You're saying where is the leader who pursues peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, right.
Just says it out loud.
One, right? Israel has a tendency, and it is the Israeli state policy, that they get to kill people who they think they call them terrorists. I think that is a too liberal use of the word. And so there have been a lot of civil rights labor leaders killed by Israel, right? Israel imprisons Palestinians at the West Bank in military courts with a 99.8% conviction rate. So there are a lot of people in Israeli prisons who would like to be the leader you speak about. Two, we have seen, peaceful protests from the Palestinians. I'm sure you're aware of the Great March of Return, right? From
Sponsored by the
2018.
Palestinian Islamic Jihad and sponsored by Hamas. I think if you're going to use that argument, go with the first Intifada. That's a bad argument, then
I'll make my arguments for myself. Thank you. During the Great March of Return, which was started by Gazans, it was a 100% peaceful protest from 2018 to 2019. On Fridays, I would believe, Gazans would simply walk to the border fence, right? Because Gaza is a refugee camp from the Nakba. The people who were displaced during the Nakba have lived in Gaza for the past 76 years, right? What was the response of Israel? They shot 300 people, killed injured about 36,000. And you're right. It was not started, but it was sponsored by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And that was Sinwar was at those protests acting peacefully. And you can say, where is this one leader? But the Palestinian people have tried diplomatic solutions. They have tried peaceful solutions. They have tried armed struggle, as is the UN has repeatedly reaffirmed their right. And so that is really what comes down to why I certainly blame Israel for the lion's share of this conflict. And I find it a little, I think saying, well, if only there was this one leader who was peaceful, everything would be fine, is disingenuous and also flies in the face.
I'm not saying that. I think there would be more hope and on the Israeli side. And if your goal is to peace and liberty and equality for all, which I think is both our goals here, that's something that I'm letting you know, the Israeli people need to see. They don't believe it right now. They just don't.
The idea that the Palestinian people have to prove to the Israelis that, they're these perfect victims who,
they don't have to be.
You just said they have to show the Israeli people.
I never said perfect.
Okay, that's my word. But you did say they have to show to the Israeli people.
They do. The thing is, the only people they don't have to show you or me. They don't have to show any of our governments. The only people they have to show, they have to earn the trust of. The only people they have to is, if they want what we want for them, is the Israeli people. They're the only ones that can change their circumstances on the ground. Like that. That's it. That is, they are the only ones. As long as they're not allowed to emigrate places other than where they are, which I also think is wrong. They're not allowed to do that, which is a whole other discussion. But there's nothing anyone else can do. We can recognize two states. We recognize Palestine.
There's lots we could do. The international community could enact what are the legal requirements of the Genocide Convention, which Israel is a signatory to, and it calls on states to not only gives them permission, but compels them to have an extraterritorial, that's the official word, anti-genocidal response. State leaders could do exactly what we did with apartheid South Africa and impose economic boycotts and sanctions. So the idea that, the Palestinians have to convince the Israelis is very not true. And it's, in my opinion, it's like saying well, if these, if freed slaves wanted rights in the Jim Crow South, they have to, convince, I don't know.
You're bringing up completely different things though. Like when you say, even if you think it's apartheid, which I just also find ridiculous, but apartheid, what it was driven by was an actual, there's a superior race here, right? And there's one that's inferior. When everything that Israel imposes, whether you think is right or wrong, is driven by safety. And whether you think it's driven by a trauma response or a trauma of generational trauma, whatever it is, that is what it's driven by. And you smile and you kind of roll your eyes and so you don't believe me, but that is what it's driven by. It's completely driven by safety. I think the checkpoints and the wall in the West Bank is a perfect example of that. Those went up after 100+ suicide bombings happened. And I know that one's not really, nothing I'm saying really seems to get you to stop.
I mean, I've heard it all before. This is I feel like this is the typical you know, Zionist response that Israel has to do what it has to do for safety reasons. And I think time and time again, we have just seen that that is, you know, not true.
One more question. Two more questions for you. One more question on this.
Okay.
In 1948 or 47, 46, 47, there were 250,000 Jews left over from refugee camps that the rest of the refugees, with hundreds of thousands of them, if not millions of them, got repatriated or got to move somewhere new. There were 250,000 Jews left at this refugee camp. And the option for them was get to Israel, Palestine, or wither away and die at these camps. And that is the only two options they have. Knowing that when they got there, there's already been some racial tension with this huge influx of a different ethnic group, there's going to be a civil war. Like, this is just like, this isn't something that's acceptable. The establishment of a Jewish state in any size in any part of the land is something that is not acceptable for the Arabs. Were the Jews going there? Was that okay that they fought for their state and survival? Like, was that okay with you? Like, the original establishment?
Are you asking me if the Nakba is okay? No.
Kind of.
Very much no.
I'm asking it. So,
No.
But if you say no,
Yes.
then
No.
the other side of that is 250,000 plus Jews just wither away and die. That is the other option. Those are the only two options in this scenario.
Well, actually, one, if we want to get deep, it's because Harry Truman was a horrible anti-Semite and didn't want Jews coming to America, right? Like, this is a big reason why Israel exists and why it's been supported by most anti-Semitic people.
But again, within the Jewish control.
No, I'm not okay with the Nakba, because you're conflating two things. Is one, should these Jewish refugees move to Palestine? And, like you said, there might be racial tension there. But that is not what they chose. What they chose to do is set up a state and ethnically cleanse the original inhabitants.
There was a civil war. There was tons of violence.
Troy, I'm not going to be partial to a conversation that denies the Nakba, right?
I'm not denying that hundreds of thousands.
Okay, so I am saying that is wrong.
What
right?
I'm saying
no.
Yeah, for sure. But what I'm saying is, within these people's control, like, America's closed. Like, you can blame right now. You're okay blaming the rest of the world for things. These people's control. Wither away and die, or go fight for survival back in this ancient homeland of yours, back where there's already a Jewish population. There always has been at least a small Jewish population. The only safe place for you to get to, and these refugees are on Cyprus and around there. It's the only place you can go. This is your only option. So if you're saying you are not okay with that, then what you're saying is it would have been more noble and just better for these Jews to die. Those are the only options. There is no C.
Let me tell you, because what you're conflating is, one, post-Holocaust Jewish refugees going to Palestine, right? And I find this a lot, is the conflation of, Jewish ancestry, Jewish history in this region is quickly linked up into the fact that there must be a Jewish ethno-state there. So no, I am saying, I think if that was the only place those people were allowed to go, they absolutely should have gone there. What they should not have done is said, okay, now we're going to form a Jewish state, right? And what they definitely should not have done is expelled and murdered the Palestinian people who lived there. So no, two wrongs do not make a right. And I do not think, the Holocaust or any atrocity really gives a group of people the right to commit another atrocity upon people. I'm a little taken aback, if I'm being honest. I feel like this is an area of the conversation I'm growing uncomfortable with, because I do feel like we're getting into like atrocity justification, which there is no justification for, the ethnic cleansing of
I feel like
any.
you've justified atrocities and claimed there should have been further atrocities against Jews. That's how I'm not even saying it's
How
going to
did
mean
I
to Jews.
justify there? How did I claim there should be? When did I claim there should be
Within this
more atrocities
conversation,
against Jews?
you have justified uh, the Second Intifada. You've
I
justified
did
October
not
7th.
justify the second intifada.
And now you're saying these people, there was going to be a civil war.
Troy,
And
at no point did I
now-
justify the second intifada. And I think if you're thinking that, you should. And this is why, a little bit earlier I said I feel like you're trying to paint me as an anti-Semite. I've
No,
never justified a suicide
I'm not.
bombing or an attack on a civilian. I am, very much against all of that, which is why I'm so passionate about this topic. And so I would appreciate if you don't say I justified the
But
second
you're saying
intifada. I don't know.
The reason I'm saying this is because you were saying I'm justifying the Nakba, but I've
I
done
do
nothing.
feel like you are.
I feel like I feel like you are as well with the Second Intifada. Like I have done nothing differently than you have, just defending these people's rights to protect themselves and their children.
Well,
like
you said there are only two options, right? This is what you said to me. There are only two options. Jewish refugees can die on Cyprus, or they can go and commit what the international community recognizes as a great crime of the 20th century, right? So, like, I have a hard time I don't see how that's. But you know what? Let me put it this way. Do you think the formation of Israel, including the Nakba, was justified?
Yeah, I do. I do think
Okay,
it was.
so I did just. Okay, so you think the Nakba was justified?
Not every part of it by any means. No, the Deir massacre, for example, not at all. No.
Okay, but it is fair to say that you have justified this atrocity at least a little bit, in some capacity.
If I have, I think it's fair to say that you have as well other atrocities.
Well, no, because you just said I think it's justified, and I am telling you I don't think something like a suicide bombing is ever justified.
Because the Nakba wasn't just murders and expulsion, which I don't find justified. There was also a lot of people fleeing. Depending on the scholar, and most of the people I've read that have written about this on both sides of this argument, will reference Benny Morris. So to use him as a reference, a ton of those people, if not majority, fled at the call, out of fear at the call. I know you have probably some sort of other person for that says something different.
No, I'm just gonna say that's still not right. People.
It's not right, but it's war, and people at that time, especially in the 40s and the 30s, like people are all over the world are being displaced because of war, and this is kind of like the story of human history, right? Is people get displaced from war. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying we have to pick up and move on, and that's all I'm saying. And I don't find it wrong that hundreds of thousands of Jews fought to survive, fought for their own survival. I don't find that wrong. I find that to be a just cause.
750,000 Palestinians.
If their other choice is death, yeah, I don't think not choosing suicide is wrong. I think that's a just cause.
You're framing this as like, I really reject. Like, you have. I think we're both aware there's been a Jewish community that predates Zionism in the land of historic Palestine, right? And what I'm telling you is, when I hear like Jews needed a place to go after the Holocaust, when I hear, there's an ancient connection to this land, and I don't doubt any of that, that is entirely separate from setting up a Jewish specific state and driving everyone else.
Every other minority that wasn't successful in this venture, their own form of Zionism, against an Arab.
There's never been another form of Zionism. Yeah, Zionism is a very specific ideology. Yeah.
It's an attempt to build a state for self-determination of a specific group of people. The Palestinians have their own kind of Zionism. The Kurds have their own kind of Zionism. There are lots of minorities within the Arab world that tried to gain their own form of self-determination, little states, and they were all, and still to this day, at least actually by this definition, definitely genocide. I don't say all of them, but all of them by the definition that we're applying to Israel, every single one were
Again, but now
genocide.
you're saying like what other people do it, so Israel
No,
gets
what
to
I'm
do
saying,
it?
no. What I'm saying is, it's been proven out that if they didn't form their own state for protection, that it's been proven out by every other minority in the area, including to this day, every single other one has been murdered en masse and expelled en masse by the surrounding Arab communities. Every single other one. And it's
I'm
continued
sorry.
to this day.
Just to clarify, other minorities have been expelled by Arabs, like in the greater Middle East.
Muslims, but it's Muslim versus Muslims at times. Yeah, the Kurds have been, they're all in basically one northeastern part. But not all, but a lot, majority have gathered there because they've been expelled. The Druze are currently being murdered. The Coptic Christians in Egypt are non-existent. Egypt was a Coptic country. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of minorities that this is proven out. That what happened, like this has been proven out, and then you add in the Jewish experience of, well, yeah, it's only a matter of time before we get slaughtered anywhere in the world.
Are you claiming that like Muslims in the Middle East like kill minorities? I'm very confused about what the claim is.
They subjugate not every Muslim country everywhere. Uzbekistan, for example, is not like this at all. UAE, at least Saudi Arabia in more recent times.
Well, I can tell you as a
Yeah,
Christian,
all over the
there's one country in the
Middle
Middle East that is currently killing Christians, that has been on Christian travel watch lists above the others. That, I haven't heard about too much Christian persecution in Lebanon. I know many Lebanese Christians, but there is one country standing above the rest for persecution of minority populations right now, and it is Israel.
Christians.
And Troy,
Christians?
the IDF has bombed.
Not Nigeria, who are executing specifically targeting Christians.
Well, I said the Middle East, right? I said the Middle East.
Northern Africa. Also, Lebanon was a Christian country. Now it's minority Christian, right? Like that's also
okay. Yeah, people convert. It's not my business. I'm telling you.
Why did they flee and convert? Why did Christians flee and convert in mass?
Troy, I kind of find the way you talk about Muslims to be kind of offensive. That if somebody converts,
I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about all Muslims. I'm talking.
Well, you
just
said I didn't say all Muslims. Troy, you just said why did they convert, implying that they were forced to convert.
Why did
Troy? People convert.
In mass.
To just say they were probably forced.
People convert in mass.
Mean,
where does that happen? When do people convert in mass?
Troy, what are you insinuating? What are you insinuating?
They were forced to convert or flee. And by the way, I know Lebanese Christians. I know Lebanese. Okay. This is true.
Do you have?
I can send you some things. Maybe tomorrow. We are late here.
Troy, I'm telling you, I
see. You're implying my race. You're implying I'm racist when everything I've said, you have said in a similar manner just towards Jews. Every single thing.
Troy, I have not said anything close to Jews as to what you have insinuated towards Muslims.
You just said Jews are murdering Christians more than any other country.
I said Israel is murdering Christians because, Israel has bombed. The Pope has spoken out against.
But Troy, in Nigeria and Algeria, they're targeting Christians specifically.
Sorry?
It said in Nigeria and Algeria, they are targeting Christians specifically in the same region. But that doesn't involve this. Your first thing you go to is there's only one country in the world right now that's really persecuting Christians.
No, I said Middle East.
That feels like a little bit of an insinuation.
Are you denying? Are you denying that Israel has not bombed churches throughout Gaza? This has been
they have.
Okay. So you understand why, as a Christian, I am not super thrilled with Israel right now.
Yes, I get it, but
Okay.
also,
So
would
maybe
you
insinuating
think
that I
that
said
if you're,
Jews kill Christians was a bit much, right?
but
Like,
I'm not
come on.
insinuating anything that you haven't
You just
insinuated.
said I said that, dude. Troy, I found this conversation to be very difficult. I feel like, if I'm being honest, I don't know. I feel like I kept having words put in my mouth, and it was.
I'm sorry. I did not mean to do that by any means. I feel the same way, actually. It's funny. I think we've given each other the same feeling.
Okay. Yeah.
And by the way, I knew this was going to be contentious because I didn't want it to be. I don't hold any ill will towards you. I don't think you're a bad guy. I think your heart is where my heart is. I think we view the world differently. And I think there's a disagree on what some facts are. And I'm just trying to understand where people in your party, so to speak, come from, and it's just very difficult for me to do. As I'm sure it's difficult for you to understand me and kind of the different groups I may represent in your mind. And
I think I do understand where you come from, if I'm being honest. I do.
do you think
I think. Sorry.
do you think I'm some sort of evil?
I think you come from a Zionist background. I think, you know, a lot of your justifications for Israeli policy are built in the self-defense of the Jewish people. I think I do understand where you're coming from. I think that is just wrong in, you know, basic in the 21st century. I don't think we should have religious, race, whatever you want to call it, based states for any reason. I feel like humanity has settled this question, and I feel like we're seeing the predictable result of a religious, race-based society.
It feels
In
weird to me that that humanitarian project has to start with the people that the world always kills. That's what feels weird to me. And it's like, why does it have to, this sort of project to start here?
Well, I wouldn't say it
This
starts
is the
there.
one. It's the world's focus for sure, and has been since before October 7th. It's the one country in the world that has to justify its existence. In my opinion, we can I don't we can let's talk another time. We don't have to talk about this topic if we feel it's too contentious. We've gone for 2 hours. I appreciate your time. Real quick, where can everybody find you, and what are you up to next?
Yeah, everybody can find me at Joe Wrote on Substack, Twitter, Blue Sky, TikTok, Instagram. I think that's all of them. As for what I'm up for next, let's see. More writing. Yeah, go check it out. Subscribe, and all my big announcements will be on there.
All right, I appreciate your time. I hope you don't think I'm evil. I don't think you're evil, and I'm just trying to understand where everything is coming from. I'd love to talk more about this, especially as the politics of our own country progress and we see where things go. And yeah, man, I appreciate your time. I know it's not the biggest, the most, maybe not something that you look forward to the most is talking to someone who you're gonna have a hard disagreement with. And a lot of people won't have a conversation like this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Have a good one, sir.
You too.